it's been amazing to follow and exciting because you say some shocking things. I can't even believe.
But I'm trying not to. Anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah. See, that's changing. Yeah. See, that's what I'm talking about. So yeah.
Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the big debate of the week. Tonight, the media coverage of Donald Trump. The presidential candidate was on The Tonight Show Thursday night, and host Jimmy Fallon was criticized for being too soft. But it's not just comedians that are being called out. Journalists are now being challenged to rethink their role, but only when it comes to covering Trump.
Nobody would expect you to have taken over the last 20 years really deep dives into some of these issues. But I'm curious about what you're doing now.
NBC News anchor Matt Lauer didn't exactly go hard on Trump, and the pundits pounced.
Well, there were definitely points where he was extremely weak and he could have easily called Donald Trump out.
Criticism of Trump is not hard to find.
Riling up all forms of bigotry and hatred.
Explicitly racist.
It's called scapegoating. It's called racism.
But it's mostly from commentators who are paid for their opinions. Journalists and anchors usually follow the long-standing tradition of appearing objective.
Donald Trump's campaign says he now believes President Obama was born in the United States.
Now, a well-known New York Times columnist says it's time for new rules, just for Trump. He's calling on journalists to drop the neutrality and just call him a crackpot. In other words, when he says,
Blood coming out of her, wherever.
call him a misogynist. When he says,
I was totally against the war in Iraq.
call him a liar. And when he says,
They're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
call him a racist. And it's not just journalists exploring new rules.
It certainly makes you think about intense narcissism.
Some psychiatrists have publicly pronounced on Trump's mental state, even though they're not supposed to diagnose someone they haven't treated themselves. They broke their rules. Should journalists do the same? I'm joined by our panelists. Adrienne Batre is editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun. Elamine Abdelmahmoud is a social media editor at BuzzFeed Canada. And Stephen Marsh is a columnist with Esquire magazine. So a real mix. We saw a columnist, a comedian being criticized. We've seen psychiatrists get their wrists slapped for suggesting that he's unhinged. Should there be new rules for Donald Trump, for journalists?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think there should be new rules in the fact that because of the dominance he has over social media. But the truth is that the media has mostly been doing its job. It has been calling him out over his fabrications, and not just the liberal media or the media who's on the side of Hillary Clinton, but the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the paper of record. They've been very clear about the lies and bringing up his personality. The thing is, it doesn't seem to resonate with the American people.
What do you think, Elamine? Time for new rules just for Donald Trump?
I think this is an egregious case, an egregious candidate who, in several times, has been consistently lying, probably week in, week out, press conference in, press conference out. He's been telling consistently many lies. He's also been actively and openly racist, and we can say that. I think it's part of our job when someone makes a distinction on race. It's not opinion to say that he's being racist. It is just fact, right? Like saying this many Muslims should not be coming into the country until we figure out what's going on over there. We can say that's a racist statement. And I don't think that's opinion. I think that's still fact. You know
Come
what I
back
mean?
to you in a second, Stephen, but Adrienne?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of rules that have shifted with Donald Trump only because he's unprecedented. We've never seen anything quite like this. And I think the media and journalists in general, we all want to be fair. We all want to give both sides of the story. But it's challenging with him because he gets ratings. And it may be distasteful and we may not like it. But broadcast news has taken every single one of his press conferences live. They'll cut out of a presidential address to go cover a Donald Trump event because you want to see what the crazy is next. I don't think about changing the rules as a fair thing because, as Elamine said, he is an aberration. This candidate, we'll likely never see anyone like it in the future.
But Elamine, are you saying that we should call him a crackpot, as Nicholas Christoph is suggesting?
To me, that's a bridge too far. Making a statement like a crackpot is a little bit too far, but making a statement like racist is perfectly within the realm of truth. It's in fact
people have been calling him a racist. They've been calling him a crackpot. There's certainly no lack of. If you're an American person and you want to read an argument that Donald Trump is mentally unfit to be president, that he's actually insane, there is no lack of places for you to go and get that information.
But there is a lack in terms of audiences finding people who are willing to say this policy is a racist policy.
See,
I don't think that's okay.
But people are going to call him out regardless. If the broadcast news decides that they are not going to, cover something or criticize something, the public is going to find that information somewhere. But here who's been the most critical of Donald Trump, and they've called him out on his narcissism. They've called him out on his over-the-top rhetoric. It's been the conservative media, and I'm talking specifically about the National Review.
Yes,
the National Review, founded by Bill Buckley Jr., was the most ardent against Donald Trump from the beginning. They wrote an entire issue saying the case against him. I mean, it's been sort of the left-wing pundits that have caught up to some of that, but none of it is going to make that much of a difference. The latest poll we see is that Donald Trump is resonating with the American people, and part of it is because the Democrats have put up arguably one of their worst candidates since Michael Dukakis.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you, like the great British leader Neil Kinnock said that, a politician cursing the press is like a sailor cursing the sea. Like, it's pointless, and also your job is to control it. I mean, I think when we blame the press, we blame the press for it, what we're trying to do is say, why are people thinking such ignorant thoughts? Right? And it's actually, maybe it's not the press, it might actually be the people. I think we should at least give some consideration to the fact that, National Review certainly called him a racist. Had no problem with it. Bret Stephens of the Wall Street Journal, no problem calling him a racist. I don't think there's any lack in the media of people willing to acknowledge what is going on here in the clearest possible terms, since they actually feel their republic is under threat by this candidate.
But I'm not talking about pundits. I'm talking about also reporters who go to these press conferences and then come back and just act as what Glenn Greenwald called just stenographers of the press conference.
Yeah, the CBC would never say liar, no liar,
That's right.
Donald Trump.
But that's a decision that has to be made in very high chambers of the corporation. And unless you're prepared to cross that...
But are you saying that most straight reporters should?
What I'm saying is that reporters should write whatever truth they've just encountered. And if part of that includes going to a press conference, listening to Donald Trump say that Muslims will not be allowed into the country, that is a racist statement.
I want to go back to a point that Stephen made about whether or not it actually makes any difference. You, ages ago, worked for Rob Ford.
Right.
The name-calling didn't seem to hurt him.
No, and it didn't. And I think part of what you see with the Donald Trump phenomenon, and even to a degree with Mayor Ford, was that he was a call-it-like-it-is sort of candidate, just plain-spoken, speaks to a part of the people that feel like they have
calls
not...
it like it is, like Mexicans are rapists?
No, I'm talking about Rob. I'm just talking about Rob Ford.
Right. Okay.
So let's just calm down. I'm talking about Mayor Ford. He had this touch about him, and there has been a likening to Donald Trump and the former mayor. Now, with Trump in particular, he's got an attitude. Rob Ford wasn't quite a jerk, the way that Trump comes across. But I think what you see is really just this idea of the part of the American people that feel that he speaks for them, regardless if we find it distasteful or not, and that there's been he's giving a voice to the voiceless for the last 8 years.
I think that's a separate story, but I think if you, again, I keep coming back to this point, but there's something about the fact that we're not willing to call this what it is, right? CBS CEO there was a recording.
Who is not willing to call it as it is? I mean, they all are calling it as it is.
I think, as far as I know, we are. BuzzFeed News is willing to call it what it is. Huffington Post does a little kicker at the end of every story that says Donald Trump is a racist, I think xenophobe, and a known liar. Look, that's a way of acknowledging that he has a history that we don't seem to be talking about.
It's almost like they're making an excuse for still covering him.
But the New York Times is reporting
this as you read all of this.
Do we think that's an excuse? The New York Times is reporting on this stuff.
I don't think it matters.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, this is the first election where Facebook just matters way more than the New York Times, way more. And what we're dealing with, the reason Trump is this is a social media election, and what we're seeing is blaming the press. The press are irrelevant.
What about Jimmy Fallon? You were rolling your eyes when you heard that clip, and he actually ruffled Trump's hair.
I think when
are there new rules for comedians? Should there be with Donald Trump?
I think Donald Trump is a real line in the sand. He's a true litmus test because he is so extreme. And he is not just an ordinary candidate that you disagree with on matters of policy. He represents a kind of violence and a kind of and a kind of just complete lack of policy.
I would argue that
totally
in 2008, during the Democratic primary, the most honest journalism was being done by Saturday Night Live. You saw Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, you know, their doppelgangers, on Saturday Night Live, and they'd say, "Candidate Obama, would you like a pillow? Secretary Clinton, why did you go into war?" You know, so it was very honest journalism. So when I watch something like Jimmy Fallon, I'm not going to get all excited about that because he's got an audience that he wants to pander to as well. And so, yeah, a lot of people on Twitter was an echo chamber that night. You could just see the anger. People were so upset with Jimmy Fallon because he didn't go after the candidate. Fallon's is a comedian.
He doesn't have a responsibility because he's a comedian? Is that what you think?
I think we're the place where citizens have a responsibility.
Comedy tradition has been one of those places where people are so responsible.
I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter. Matt Lauer is a well-respected journalist.
So, Stephen, just leave it to the people to figure it out, give them in the information,
Look, I think
decide.
when you blame the press, you're essentially saying, why don't people think the way that I do? Why don't people think the way that the press does? And I think that's what that's about. I think it's just a folly to blame the press for the opinions of the American people, right? And I think the opinions, like the press has called out Trump and all this stuff, and the people still love him. So I think blaming the media for the situation is just not accurate.
And changing the rules for us too.
The public, it's totally okay for the public to think what they want to think. We have a job, right, as people who work in this industry, and we have ethics standards, we have journalistic standards, and I don't think we should be violating those, whether they're important or not, whether they make a difference or not.
I don't want to call Stephen old, but I'm wondering if there's a generational divide here. Like HuffPo and BuzzFeed are out there name-calling. How appropriate that is up for debate. But is there a generational divide here, and how?
Probably.
I would say so.
I think so.
But I don't think it's. I mean, I think with the generational divide we're seeing is that Donald Trump is of the Facebook era. And Hillary Clinton is of the older generation. She has all the newspapers on her side. She has the Houston Chronicle. She has papers that haven't gone for a Democratic candidate in 100 years are not supporting a Republican candidate this time. Donald Trump doesn't care about it at all. Yeah. He barely has a media team. What he has is Twitter and Facebook. He has 28 million Facebook followers and likes. I think it's around there, right? I mean, he has just figured out that if you control the viral space, people like us just do not matter.
But the media is also willing to follow him, and I think he's been using that
Of course he has, and we saw that the other day with his whole birther announcement, and everybody was held hostage there for how long?
And after that, everyone said, not everyone, some columnists were saying we should just stop covering Trump.
But that will never happen.
I don't see that happening.
Never
Here we are.
That's because there's a commercial stake, right? That's why we keep covering
It's
Trump.
more than a commercial. This is a candidate. Like, you have to cover him.
This is not over. We will talk again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.